Hi, I'm Jack and welcome back to Real Opinions, and today I'm going to be reviewing the series Yuri on Ice. So Yuri on Ice is a sports series that follows figure skating, male figure skating, and it focuses on the main character, Yuri, a Japanese skater, but then has fallen in his way and he's just kind of lost the passion for the sport entirely, and he's just dipping down the rankings and is going to give up. As he comes back home after performing poorly in his last competition, he just kind of willing to give up. He performs one kind of final skate for a friend that is inspired by this famous skater Victor. The friend films it and it goes up online and it becomes viral, and the famous skater Victor decides to retire and become his coach for a season, and then it's kind of following their journey as they bring him back up from the depths of losing to trying to win the Grand Prix final. The way I'd kind of describe this series is that it's good but flawed. I'll focus on the bits I really liked first and then I'll get into that later on. I did enjoy the series, and it's just that some of the flaws I can't blame on it and others I can. First, I'll focus on the skating, which was the main reason that I kind of got into this. Is that, I don't know, it was interesting in that it's something that I'd never really thought of before. You could say, oh, it's just another sport to try something else, but it was something I wanted to see, and this is a weird kind of comparison to bring up, but it reminded me in some ways of Whiplash. It's about a subject that you wouldn't think about before, like you didn't care about before, but it's in the way that it's portrayed, in the way that you can see how earnestly the people love it in that community, is that then it makes you interested in it. I came out of Whiplash thinking, jazz is really interesting, like that kind of aspect of jazz was brilliant, and how they managed to put so much soul and so much thought and work, and that was very much the same in some aspects of this with figure skating, in that I think this did really well for, even though it's animation, it really managed to convey the characters' emotions within their dance, which I didn't think they'd be able to kind of do just from the skating alone. I mean, they do rely on monologue occasionally, however most of the time when they're just skating it is the commentators explaining the rules or the kind of point system, which I think definitely helps and is needed in this, because even up to the end they were introducing rules that helped you understand why people were doing better than others. I'm getting distracted, but yeah, I think that they did very well to, one, get you to realise how hard ice skating really is, how beautiful it can kind of be, and how people can convey their own thoughts and emotions through it. That's coupled with the animation, which I thought was really great at times. They did skimp in moments, but I think that was, again, I heard they had production difficulties, but I don't know the details, where it kind of comes in around, I believe, episode 4 or something like that, so they start switching to sometimes 3D models, which is kind of jarring at first, but you do get used to the kind of dips in quality, and they do, when it comes to the important moments later on, they still bring back the good animation, so that's good. And it never really uses its general style, like it always maintains that. And also as well, I really liked the director, Sayo Yamamoto. I think that the way then in which it was directed really managed to bring out this emotion that I just said, and also as well, I think it managed to make the skates more interesting. When I'll come to a kind of flaw later on, that the kind of repetitiveness of the skating, but I think that in many ways her directing helped it from being too repetitive. Yeah, now I'll come into my flaws, which mostly come with story and structure, in that this really feels like it was a 22-24 episode show that was cut in half, and they just kind of had to make do with what they had. In a most kind of typical show or film like this about a sport, it is about the people striving in the training to overcome their personal difficulties, relationships, etc., and then the last quarter, last third maybe, is the final, whatever, the final match, the thing to win, to get the money to save their school, whatever, etc. However, in this, it's like they have the kind of intro episode, which I believe was the best one, then they have this like episode of training, and then every single episode after that is basically competitions, except for like one near the very end, which is like a breather. Like it jumps right into the competitions, in which case, and so with these competitions they have to show all the competitors and they have to show the same skates. It was like they cut out all of the character development for like the first half of a series. There was still character development throughout the rest of the show, and it wasn't like there was just this massive inconsistency, but it just felt like there should have been a long time for them to develop, and him and Victor to develop their friendship and relationship later on. And I just thought that there was a whole backbone to this story that was really missing and could have really helped when it came to the bits where 2/3 of the episodes, it feels like, is just competitions with tiny like minute segments in between occasional shows to have character moments. And so when it came to these episodes where it's just competition sure, the competition and the skating is really involving, but you kind of felt lacking in the character department. I may be different in this because it seems like a lot of people really love the characters and really love their relationships in particular. However, I just never got on board with it. It felt very rushed and very forced, all of the relationships, and I felt like a lot of the characters were just introduced as having a quirk, or just, this is this type of character, and then that was it. I'll set it up using the structure of the show. So for instance, in the very first episode, Yuri goes back home to Japan, and you meet his family, you meet his friends, you meet the girl that he sort of pined for as a young boy, who then married someone else and now has children. So you think this is going to be like the stable side characters throughout the entire show. That's what you do with a pilot. You establish all the side characters, or at least some of the side characters, that will remain for the rest of the plot. And I mean, Victor's the exception because he comes in at the very end of the episode, but that's acceptable. And then after that episode, none of them get more than a couple lines each after that. They're just disappeared, and you kind of think, what was the point in introducing all those characters? Well, I genuinely liked all the idea of where they could go with those characters in the very beginning. I liked the fact that he kind of had this love interest that he could never really get, and that the reason why he did the first skate in the first episode is kind of to, almost in a way, show his affection for her, and how his affection for her eventually led him to become this quality of skater, because she loved Victor, the Russian skater. And I thought that was going to be a kind of thing that he was either getting over or would then lead him to, and then this skating thing is to help him kind of move on from that and then find someone else, which he does in Victor, I suppose. But I mean, it felt like they cut them off, and then it gets to the first competition and you're introduced to 5 other skaters they have to compete against, who all have their own different personality quirk. And then at the end of that competition, some of them get knocked out, so you never even see them again. So that's what, 2 episodes. They don't spend a lot of time on these characters, but they spend almost the exact same amount of time as the main characters do on screen in those episodes, because they have to have these 6 skates that will happen, and they have to have a background feature these skates. And it just, again, it was, why do I need to know about this kind of side character? Why are they more important than developing the main characters more, is what I felt. And then this happens with the second round of skating, where they're introduced to even more, and sure, some of these skaters do continue to the final and 2 other rounds, but some of them just completely disappear, and then others they are added as side characters, and they have these little moments, and they are enjoyable characters, don't get me wrong. Some of them are fun to watch, and I like the way how they interact with the main characters, but they don't really have enough behind them to reason why you should be taking away what little time you have away from the main characters. Another kind of problem with this structure of round 1, round 2, round 3, the final is round 3, is that skaters, once they've entered with a skate, they have to do it again in every round. And so you see Yuri, the main character, skate the same sequence 3 different times. For him, it's good, because even though you've gotten used to the skate, they managed to show how his developing emotions affect the skate, kind of gets you involved with it, which is really great, and it shows how she's evolving within the same routine, which that is great, and that's another thing where you can see why people really get into ice skating. However, with the other characters, you don't really see that development, because you see their skate, and that's it, and then maybe they come back for a second one, and for some of them they haven't had any character development because they're a side character, so you're thinking, why do I have to watch this again? Sure, it's enjoyable, sure, it's fun to watch the skating, but I mean, and so for some of these characters, all their reasoning is given in the monologue while they are skating, and I just think, again, it's great that you have more of the skating in that looks great and is fun to watch, but why does that reason taking away from moments where you could be having with the main characters and could be developing this relationship that seems to be, for a lot of the audience, they want the relationship to be the core of the show. So as well as all the kind of home characters that I believe were snubbed in this show, they kind of introduced right from the very beginning that he sort of has a new rival in Yuri Poletsky, who's a Russian Yuri, who's kind of a 15-year-old guy that's just coming up. They kind of pit him as like a rough around the edges boy that looked up to Victor as well, but has more of an aggressive way about trying to beat him as opposed to a loving way. If anything, I thought his kind of character arc was more interesting than the main characters in many ways. They definitely gave him the most time out of the main couple. I still thought that he could have deserved more time, and especially near the finale, I felt like he deserved a lot more focus, as, like I said, I just thought he was a more interesting story. Just quickly, I realised I didn't put this positive note in before, but for these skates as well, the music is really memorable. So for instance, if you're not that into ice skating, I can see why watching 2 minutes of that wouldn't be very interesting, but when it's got the music behind it, one, it helps the emotions of what they're trying to convey, of course, that's the whole point of the music, but I mean, the fact that they picked really good music for some of it as well really did improve it. I don't really focus that much on score in TV shows, but this was one of the ones where I did enjoy listening to it. But yeah, I think overall, the main problem with this show is that it did not have enough time to develop the characters as much as they should have. I believe it should have been a longer episode show, but again, that's down to funding. You can't really help that if that was all that they were given. However, that then goes on to me saying that there were problems within the show that they could have helped. Don't introduce side characters that just had no point besides being side characters. It felt like there wasn't enough confidence in the relationship between the two characters that they thought that it needed padding with other characters and with other relationships that people could focus on. And because of this lack of confidence, I think that it actually made the pairing, this is just a personal thing for me anyway, I just felt like if they just spent the time to build the foundation properly at the beginning of the series, then when it comes to the kind of romantic revelations and the heart pouring of the later episodes, that means it's, one, it just feels a lot more earned, and then two, when you get to these emotional climaxes that the show is genuinely good at, it would have given an even greater punch if you cared even more about these characters. Again, just took away from what I believe was the core of the show. And because of that, I think I'm going to have to give it a 7 out of 10. Yeah, Yuri on Ice. If it sounds like your kind of thing that you'd be interested in, I'd watch it. Yeah, I'd watch it if you're interested in animation, in sports. Again, like I said, the main focus sort of towards the end is these personal relationships and these romantic relationships. However, I don't feel like they're developed enough for me to say if you love romance, go watch it. I think that it's best to kind of watch it if you have an enjoyment for watching a kind of underdog story of watching someone develop to be better at the thing that they love, and then in with that comes a sort of love story.